Ramana Maharshi was one of the most beautiful embodiments of the self ever to appear. I'll say it that simply. The very embodiment of graciousness, kindness, fearlessness and desirelessness, holiness, in a word. And his graciousness was especially gracious, especially generous, especially trusting, because he did not presume that anyone was unenlightened. There's a lot of teachers that have had tremendous realizations, and they have a lot to share, but they're still subtly caught because they're going around thinking they're a somebody whose purpose is to enlighten other somebodies. Ramana never harbored that presumption, that delusion. It was so clear, so self-evidently, or what we call SubVyasly, the case that there's only the self. The self is not an object. That's why I say the self isn't obvious, except all of this manifestation has a source. So the self is obviously the source of all objects, but the self-nature, your real nature, is self-evident, not as an object. So we coined a word, SubVyas, here. Ramana was so clear about the self-evident nature of the self. Everyone's true self-nature was so SubVyas to him that he did not presume anyone was truly, fundamentally unenlightened, not being the self. There's actually an old saying out of India, I've repeated it here and there because it so beautifully sums up the great paradox here. The true sages like Ramana Maharshi, when they look at you, they see the absolute divine nature. And when I say see, again, the self is not an object, so they see this, they know this by being this clearly, spiritually, formlessly. And they see that the humanness is just a temporary manifestation, the whim, the lila, the play, the dream of the divine. So that's why Ramana was so gracious. He didn't see anything wrong with you. He didn't see a spot, a speck of anything that needed to be removed. He knew that the self is the self, and it plays perfectly as this human with their different samskaras, unwholesome and wholesome samskaras. The wholesome samskaras are like certain aptitudes and gifts and skills and talents. And he knew that everything was coming off perfectly, that the whole play is ensuing right as it needs to be, right how it needs to be. Everything's perfectly on divine schedule for the cellular evolution, the playing out in time, the space of personal consciousnesses involved in becoming more and more refined, more awake, more liberated. But he knew that timelessly you are what you are, the self, not other than the divine nature. So he didn't see unenlightened beings, he saw only the divine. And then timelessly on what I've called level 2, the level of inherent perfection of all beings in the play of multiplicity, he saw that all are already free. Each soul is pure, pure, pure. And on what I call level 3, the pragmatic functional level, he would attend to people's questions, their concerns, their suffering, the pain, the intensity underneath that suffering. He was very solicitous of people's well-being on the physical, emotional, family, financial level, community level. But deep down, he saw only the self. And so he knew that any upadesh, spiritual instruction, was a play, a preliminary, what the Buddhists call upaya, expedient means. Meaning that your true nature doesn't need any teachings, does not need to improve, doesn't have any problems, is always the perfect divine fullness, purnam. That's the significance of Ramana Maharshi in our era.
You and I also shared an email recently about his reminder of Sahaja Samadhi.
As he demonstrated, he exemplified the supreme or superior samadhi, which is the Sahaja Samadhi, the eyes open, hands functioning, body, mind, functional ego, personal consciousness available for service. He'd already spent a lot of time after the initial awakening at age 16, before he then came off to Tiruvannamalai, the holy temple, the big Shiva temple in town, and then all that time up on the holy mountain Arunachala. He spent a lot of time back at Madurai and then at Tiruvannamalai and up on the hill in nirvikalpa samadhi. But it yielded onto, it gave way to Sahaja Samadhi, where he didn't seem to be in trance anymore, except that he was always absorbed in the one self of all. So he said the nirvikalpa samadhi, that thick, deep silence, vibrationless, pure awareness. It's like the clarity of awake sleep. Sleeping awakeness. It's like deep sleep, carefree abandon, all surrendered, nothing matters. Samadhi, there's lucidity and clarity, so it's not just being asleep. So that's nirvikalpa samadhi. It's like deep dreamless sleep. Just lucid, literal pure awareness. No worlds, no happenings, no events, no nothing, no objects. Ramana spent probably, if one were to tally it, several years of his life, at least that, were spent in that nirvikalpa samadhi. But then he later said Sahaja Samadhi is superior to that. You might wonder, is the nirvikalpa samadhi necessary for Sahaja Samadhi? And I would say in most cases, yes, it's useful to have at least some periods of time in nirvikalpa samadhi. Really to just zero out. To show that consciousness alone is, underneath the whole play of objects in the universal play of consciousness. Prior to all of this is supreme awareness. And it can manifest in the purity of consciousness, nothing happening in a nirvikalpa samadhi. It's a total death to the world, death to the ego, death to any agenda. There are some beings that seem to wake up to a Sahaja Samadhi without going through the deep nirvikalpa samadhis. At least they don't have to spend much time in the nirvikalpa samadhi, and their whole life is just free. unburdened, unhindered by divine grace. Let's share from one of the Upanishads.